Hello, everyone. I chose the topic of bullying because of its prevalence and impact in today's society. I was interested to learn a little bit more about bullying because of my interaction with youth through my role with Texas 4-H. Though we try to take several precautions, there are still several cases of bullying in our program. So I just wanted to learn more about prevention, intervention, and how we as educators can play a part in preventing bullying. To me, the importance of bullying just lies in the people that it affects. Being from youth development and understanding how youth learn and grow, you have to understand how these youth are affected every single day by bullying. And you can see here just several tabloids just from recent years of youth either going to severe extremes or even taking their own life after consequences of bullying. To me, it's in the people itself as to why preventing and intervening on situations of bullying is so very important. These youth not only lose their life, but their families, their friends, and their schools are affected simply by an act that could have easily been prevented. That's where the importance of bullying lies with me. Let's try to define what bullying is. Bullying is an aggressive behavior with the intent to cause another person harm, repeated over time, and is caused by an imbalance of power. This comes straight from our text, and I think it's a good example and definition of what bullying is in general. Moving on, let's talk about a specific type of bullying that is perhaps most prevalent today, that being cyberbullying. This is most common today simply because of the scope and impact that technology has on today's society. Cyberbullying uses information and electronic means to perpetrate deliberate, repeated, and often hostile behavior that is intended to harm others. Much of the tabloids or headlines that we see in today's news is regarding cyberbullying. Again, just because of youth using things like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, a number of different social media platforms to cause this harm. What we don't really have the way to understand yet is in a different aspect than normal bullying through physical or verbal type of abuse at school, we can easily prevent that with an in-person type of training from teachers or faculty. Unfortunately, when we get into cyberbullying, much of this can take place behind the confines of a text message or something like that where adults don't have access to view it. That's what makes cyberbullying so scary and so impactful for our youth, because we really don't have any way as adults or as educators to intervene in that process. A little bit about relevance and the scope of bullying. Over 3.2 million students are victims of bullying each year. As a result of this bullying, 30% of those have performed self-harm. An additional 30% have suicidal thoughts. 20% have skipped class due to bullying. 10% have attempted suicide and failed, and then 10% abuse drugs or alcohol as a result of bullying to cope with the stress of that. In saying this, I think this just really illuminates the relevance of bullying and how it's such an impactful type of action for our young people, whether they're the bully or the victim, and we'll get into that a little bit more. In terms of the impact and long-term effects of bullying, there are both physical and psychological consequences to bullying. Many of those are things that we readily think about: anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, loneliness due to isolation, increased at-risk behaviors, much of what we've learned about in this class, distress, poor social adjustment, again, isolation, and then of course in school, conduct disorder, and unfortunately the most severe of all of these, suicidal ideation. Perhaps one of the two of the most important aspects of these are related to relational aggression or rumor spreading. We know that this is very common among our young people, especially in school and youth type of settings, and this specifically causes depression and, again, that suicidal ideation, which is the absolute worst case scenario for our young people. In saying this, educators should be keenly aware that bullying actually makes youth miss out on the opportunities afforded by education. Because of bullying, they feel those things like anxiety, loneliness, isolation, things that prevent them from being fully engaged with the learning experience, whether it be in group projects, in social type settings, and of course just missing school. If they're not in school, they're not taking advantage of the learning opportunities presented there, which of course causes them to miss out on all of the opportunities of education. Adding on to that, a stat I found from DoSomething.org, which is a campaign against bullying, approximately 160,000 teens skip school every single day because of bullying. They're simply scared to go to school and just don't want to deal with the stress of it every day, so they opt out and think that missing is a better opportunity for them to simply skip out on the learning opportunity altogether and stay at home in an effort to avoid this circumstance. An alternate point of view of bullying is something that I found very interesting. Most of the time we only think of the victim when we're thinking about bullying, but something that was interesting to me from our text was the consequences for the bully themselves. What I found in researching this is that bullies are actually more likely to engage in substance abuse through being a bully, experience low performance in school, and as a result have a low socioeconomic status as they grow older. Another thing we know about bullies is that they usually have a poor child-caregiver relationship. That would be things like relationships with their parents or guardians back home, having some aggression there, maybe not following rules and guidelines set forth by their caregivers. Additionally, these are very interesting to me. We know that through research that bullies actually have peer rejection, which is exactly what they are imposing on the victim. They also have higher instances of criminality and violence and suicidal ideation. What I find most shocking from this is that actually two of these risk factors for bullies are actually shared with their victims, that being peer rejection. Like I said, bullies are actually imposing this on their victim, and they are too, in fact, experiencing that. And then the suicidal ideation. Through bullying, they are creating their victim in some cases to have those thoughts as well. And it's interesting to see through statistics that this is actually shared with the bully themselves. In terms of prevention, our text kind of outlines three approaches to that: primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention efforts. Looking at primary efforts, these are really broad, school-wide type of efforts that schools and communities can take to kind of blanket a prevention effort over all of the youth in that area. We know that about 80% of youth need primary prevention efforts. Like I said, these are school-wide efforts, sometimes simply just rules and consequences put in place to prevent bullying. Going on additionally, anti-bullying committees, groups that can help combat these issues, whether it be through school-wide campaigns, things like that. This type of prevention method is widely accepted. 49 of the 50 states have enforced anti-bullying laws. Moving on to secondary prevention, this gets just a little bit closer to the action of bullying. 15% of our youth need this. This includes putting in place bystander intervention trainings and protocol, and also trainings for faculty, students, and staff to know how to report instances of bullying. Moving on to tertiary prevention efforts, 5% of youth need this type of prevention effort. This includes individual counseling, maybe before the bullying is occurring, but when we understand and see those at-risk factors. Additionally, behavioral assessments, and this is something that is mentioned again and again in research regarding bullying, is the need to assess and understand where the bully and victim both are coming from and the experiences that are leading to these type of bullying behaviors. Delving in a little bit further to prevention, individual counseling can be just one-on-one counseling with a teacher, with a medical personnel, something like that, trying to identify, express, and cope with the feelings and emotions that are leading up to the bullying behavior in an effort to prevent that from occurring. Another thing that is widely accepted in much research and literature regarding bullying is the idea of group counseling with parents. So it is very well accepted that parents and guardians truly play an impactful part of the bullying experience in terms of prevention, communication, active involvement in the student's life. Things like that can really help prevent those from coming to fruition. Like I said, training with parents to understand communication and ways to prevent the student from hearing or seeing things that could cause bullying behaviors. In terms of school prevention, like I mentioned earlier, schools are doing a great job of providing that primary source of prevention, those blanket type approaches. This is due in part to increased recent shootings that are happening that have caused a catalyst for these prevention type methods. In terms of intervention, these would be some strategies that would be put in place after the bullying has occurred in an effort to stop it and prevent it in the future. One method of doing this is individual counseling. Again, this is an intervention for the specific child based on past experiences and should include assessments. Again, it is very important to note that this should be targeted and needs approached. It should be tailored to fit the specific situations that this child has faced leading up to this behavior. Again, it should focus on identifying and expressing healthier ways of coping with their feelings. So instead of letting out aggression, what are alternate ways that they could channel this energy that is leading to bullying? In terms of group counseling, this is an aspect of intervention that I found very interesting and what I would think would be very appropriate for a bullying instance in a school, and that would be to include training in assertiveness and friendship building. The idea of group counseling in itself brings people together. So this provides the bully an opportunity to not only explore their emotions and ways to channel that, but also building trusting relationships with the people in that group. So through the group counseling, they not only learn how to cope and adjust, but also in that process, they're making friends from that inner group that they can trust. So I think that that could be a very useful type of counseling tool to be utilized. And again, I'll hit on it again because I think it has much merit in this instance, and that's the idea of family involvement. I believe that parents should consider the messages that they are teaching at home, whether that be through what they're watching on TV, what type of social media usage they're allowing, what type of exposure are they allowing their youth to view at home, whether it be through, just magazines or like I said, what they're watching on TV, what they're listening to, the radio stations they're listening to. What is that child being exposed to at home that could be encouraging these types of behavior? Additionally, aside from preventing what the child sees and hears and experiences, families should also encourage their youth to ask for help, whether they're the bully or the victim. If the child is experiencing this at home, then they need to know that there's an outlet for support and encouragement at home. In terms of intervention at the school, again, they take 3 types of approaches similar to that of primary, secondary, and tertiary. In schools, it's usually called Tier 1 through Tier 3 programs. They kind of mimic that of the primary, secondary, and tertiary in terms of their approach. So let's go through some of the interventions that schools can take. In terms of Tier 1 programs, this would be, like I said, a blanket approach to increasing awareness of bullying, that it is an actual problem in their school and community. Additionally, creating a positive school climate. That should be among faculty members, staff members. If the adults are imitating a good model for students to follow, then that would be a good form of prevention and intervention. And finally, teaching faculty how to report bullying and how to identify it. Moving on to Tier 2 programs, this would be, like I said, getting one step closer to the actual act of bullying, and that would be classroom level and small groups, focusing on social skills and peer mentoring. This would be similar to what I talked about in group type of counseling, where it's one-on-one with other peers who are closer to their age, who could help them kind of bridge the gap between the bully and people that could be victims. In terms of Tier 3 programs, these are specific interventions that should be taken in the event of bullying in a school, and this would be individual or targeted interventions, including counseling. Unfortunately, though this could be the most important aspect for intervention in a bullying type situation is just one-on-one, it's not very well supported by research. One type of overlying understanding regarding bullying is that of collaboration. And in terms of preventing and intervening in bullying situations, collaboration must be present. This is a working relationship between families, communities, schools, and through all social contexts, whether that be counseling or medical resources. Everyone must be on board in the community to ensure that prevention and intervention is taken seriously and has a well-working relationship with all of these different groups. Efforts from all professionals in this field is essential for successful outcomes in terms of preventing bullying. Here are some of my references. Again, our text, Capuzzi and Gross. I found a great resource in terms of the long-term effects of bullying from Wolke and Larrea. And then a really great website that provided much of my statistics was the Do Something campaign online. Helpful resources, these are some of those Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 programs that can actually help and be implemented in schools and communities. Thank you.